another episode of Hackers' Misadventures in Scale Modeling. Now we continue with our series on Royal Canadian Air Force aircraft because of the 100-year anniversary. We're going to be delving into the Canadair CL-13 Sabre. Now the Canadian Sabre was manufactured in Canada by Canadair, and they gave it the abbreviation of CL-13. Now, it will explain, the video I'm going to be watching is Dung Tren's Military Affairs. Go over to his channel and watch it. But he goes in depth about the Canadair Sabre and how it different from the other Sabres that were produced by North America. But anyways, let's see here. Let's go on to our video and listen what the man has to say.
I have a story to tell.
F-86 Sabre, a famous design known for its outstanding combat performance during the Korean War. First flown in 1947, the swept-wing Sabre was the United States military's first fighter to fly supersonic, in a dive. The F-86 was also built under license, and was in service with many air forces around the world. In Canada, the F-86 is known as the Canadair CL-13 Sabre, built under license from North American Aviation. The CL-13 was produced until 1958, and was used primarily by the Royal Canadian Air Force until it was replaced by the Canadian CF-104 in 1962. First flight of a Canadian Sabre was on August 9, 1950. Canadair produced 6 versions of the CL-13 Sabre. The Seoul Sabre Mark I was essentially the same as the North American Sabre F-86A. It had a General Electric J-47 G13 turbojet of 23 kilonewtons thrust. The Sabre Mark II had the same engine, although after the first 20 aircraft were produced, the remainder of the production run was distinguished in having power-assisted controls and an all-flying tailplane. The Seoul Sabre Mark III was the first of the Canadian Sabres to use the Avro Canada and a turbojet. The Sabre Mark IV retained the General Electric engine, and was destined for the Royal Canadian Air Force and was later passed on to other overseas air forces. The Sabre Mark V was the next production version, equipped with an Arenda 10 with 29 kilonewtons thrust. A change to the Arenda 14 with 33 kilonewtons powered the Sabre Mark VI. The Mark VI, with a more powerful version of the Arenda, is widely considered the best of all Sabres. It has a length of 11.44 meters, a wingspan of 11.31 meters, a height of 4.49 meters, an empty weight of 4.8 tons, and a maximum takeoff weight of 17.5 tons. It is powered by an Avro Canada Arenda 14 turbojet engine, with 32.36 kilonewtons of thrust. Mark VI could reach a maximum speed of 1,122 km per hour at sea level, range was 2,384 km, service ceiling was 16,500 meters, and rate of climb was 61.2 meters per second. The last of the Canadair Sabres in frontline operation were in Pakistan, whose AM-9 Sidewinder-equipped Mark VI models were the backbone of their air force during the Indo-Pakistani War of 1971. These racked up an impressive victory ratio over their Indian counterparts, which lacked missiles. These were slowly phased out after 1971, with the last examples leaving combat service in 1980. the last Sabre, after being donated by the Pakistan Air Force, is now part of the permanent collection in the Western Canada Aviation Museum in Winnipeg, Manitoba. From 1950 to 1958, a total of 1,815 CL-13 Sabres were built at the Canadair plant in Montreal.
Now, that was interesting. So, I have another video from a museum that has further history. So, give me a sec. Now, this one here is a museum in Seattle, in Seattle, Washington State, that has a Canadair Sabre. Now, be warned, the guy was trying to do a Canadian accent. And being Canadian, I think it was rather lousy. He's doing Bob and Doug McKenzie, which they basically overdid the accent for comedy reasons. Anyways, he has very interesting history too on the Canadair Sabre, especially this particular model. So let's go watch and see what he has to say.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Curator on the Loose. I'm Matthew Burchett. I am the Senior Curator on the Loose at the Museum of Flight in Seattle, Washington. Now, pay attention. Today is a little bit different than all our other episodes. Why? Because I'm bringing it to you in a foreign language. We will have subtitles, so don't freak out. All right, you ready? Here we go. Okay. So beauty, eh? We're talking about this bird, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, oh, that hoser's lost his mind. He's talking about an F-86. No way, take off. We're talking about the CL-13A. Eh? All right, enough of that. Truly, we are talking about the CL-13A, which is this guy. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking it's an F-86. Well, you're kind of right. It's a license-built F-86 made by Canadair. In 1948, the Royal Canadian Air Force decided, you know what, we need to replace our little Vampire fighters. So they started looking around and they settled on the F-86, and they approached the United States, specifically North American Aviation, and they said, hey, we want to build this thing in Canada, eh? Can we do it? North America said, sure, go ahead. So they started building F-86s, and they called them the CL-13. Why the F-86? Because in 1945, North American Aviation was given some really important documents from captured German sources, and they utilized that information to begin to design this guy, the F-86. One of the things that went into the design was the swept wing. That was kind of a new deal back in 45, and in 47, they already had a flight test aircraft, and in 48, this thing had broken the sound barrier. All right, I know what you're yelling right now. No, it didn't. Well, yes, it did, but it was in a dive, so it really didn't count. Anyway, so the Canadians really wanted a more advanced fighter than the little British Vampire they were flying. So they settled on this guy, and it was an amazing fighter for them. Came in 6 different marks. The Mark I was basically an F-86A. The Mark II was an F-86E. The Mark III was an F-86E, but it used an Orinda Canadian-built engine. And the Mark IV was basically a Mark II, but with a couple of changes. And then the Mark V, which is what this guy is, was also powered by an Orinda engine, but an up-powered engine, so it had a much better flight capability. And then the Mark VI was the ultimate Canadian Sabre. One of the cool things about this aircraft is we know its entire history. It was delivered to the Royal Canadian Air Force in 1955, and it did duty in what they called their OTU, which is Operational Training Unit. Basically, it taught Sabre pilots how to be Sabre pilots, and it did that for many years until the OTU then became the Sabre Transition Team. Now, what does that mean? Well, the Canadians knew they needed kind of a higher performance aircraft than the F-86. So the Sabre Transition Team was the lead-in aircraft for the CF-104. So think license-built Lockheed F-104 Starfighter. And it did that for many years until 1963. And that's when the Canadians retired the old F-86s or CL-13s in favor of the CF-104. Now, what happened to these guys? Well, they all basically got sold off or scrapped, but Colonel Arnie Bauer, who ran the OTU and Sabre Transition Team, decided for what they called the Sabre Swan, he was going to fly this particular bird, his own personal mount, from Chatham in New Brunswick all the way out here to the West Coast and then back again, kind of as a final swan song for the F-86. And he did that, and it made some pretty good headlines and was actually, when you think about it, pretty cool for the day. After Colonel Bauer's Sabre Swan flight in 1969, he took this very same bird on the absolute last CL-13 flight in 1969. She flew out of Chatham, New Brunswick again and went into storage. After being in storage, she was bought up by Maritime Aircraft Overhaul and Repair, and they took her and turned her into a Mark 6 and were going to sell her to Pakistan. But the war had just broken out between India and Pakistan, and the Canadian government said, "Oh, no way," and so she was sold to Boeing instead. Now, what the heck did Boeing do with her? They turned her into a chase plane, and she was there for the first flight of the 747. That is really cool. And she flew with Boeing until 1991 as a chase plane. And when she came to us, she was still in a really neat livery, and I think we've got some photos we can probably post to show you. Alright, here's your fun fact for today. Did you know that aviatrix Jackie Cochran flew a CL-13 to 2 world records in 1953? It's true. She also became the first woman to go supersonic, and in a CL-13. Now, why did she use a CL-13? It's actually easy. She went to the Air Force and said, "Hey, I'd like to borrow one of your F-86s," and they went, "No, not gonna happen." So she went to the Canadians, and the Canadians, in their typical way, said, Okay, here is your homework for today. Google Golden Hawks. It's the aerial demonstration team that Canada put together from 1959 to 1964, and they flew CL-13s. Talk about a cool looking paint job. Alright, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the CL-13, It was beauty. We really appreciate you guys continuing to watch. If you've got questions or comments, hit us up on YouTube, Facebook, and you can even send email at curator@museumofflight.org. We will certainly answer your questions.
So let's go find some Golden Hawks while we're at it, just so you have some fun looking at them. You probably hear somebody cough in the background. I got my daughter home and she's got an awful cold, but it is what it is. Anyways, I found a restored 1962 CBC segment on the Golden Hawks. There's no narration, just strictly aircraft and sounds.
mile and a half of
I was
pavement,
wrong, there was
streaked
one.
with the tire marks of 1,000 landings. On a signal from Lloyd Hubbard, they begin the takeoff.
Look at all the interesting aircraft.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Royal Canadian Air Force proudly presents
The Golden Hawks. The smoke comes on and they start up into their pull-up. Now watch closely as the solos break off to the left and right, leaving the other four in the diamond or box formation. This is the formation the team will be using for most of today's show. Watch the formation as they pull over on their back and dive away to your left. They will be turning in to pass directly in front of you in a steep turn. Not a single movement is wasted. Now the 8-point roll.
coming in from your right. Flight Lieutenant Miller will roll his aircraft, stopping at each 45 degrees of roll. Yet he will maintain his original direction.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8.
The team will now combine two maneuvers with two formation changes. On the first loop, they will change from card 5 to flag formation. On the second, from flag to Vic formation.
From the earliest days of flight, aerobatic flying has challenged the pilot and held the viewers spellbound. Wing-walking stuntmen of the 20s have given way to G-suited, highly skilled and trained precision flyers of the space age. For the pilot, the desire to hurtle high into the sky is always there. As manned craft become faster and faster, they'll be driven higher and higher, and someday the air show will be a thing of the past. But in the meantime, aerobatic teams such as the RAF Trebelon Squadron, the U.S. Air Force's Blue Angels and Thunderbirds, and Canada's Golden Hawks are thrilling audiences in every corner of the globe with spectacular displays of precision flying. Tomorrow, they and their brothers will be in orbit, searching out the mysteries of the universe. Godspeed to them in the future. Godspeed to them now.
Now that was interesting. So we're going to go on to models available and some modeling facts for you guys if you want to do a Sabre. So we'll move on to that next. Now, for any of you that want to build a Canadair CL-13 Sabre, there are some differences between the Canadair built version and the North American built version. Now, fortunately, I have some stuff here for you that might help you out a little bit. So let's start with the bodies. As you can tell from here, if I can make it a little bit larger here for you. This is the difference between the bodies of the Canadair version and North American version. As you can see, you have to eliminate using that. Let's say it says here an E version. You got to eliminate this, and you got to add that, and you got to send down that. Now, it says here that you also on this side have to add you had to fill in this part, and well, no, you got to add a fill filter there and seal vent there. Okay, so that's one part. Now, the wings are typical of the Sabre built by North America and Canadair. There's only one difference. Well, no, I'm sorry. There's two differences. As you can see here, this is the ADE and early F. This also applies to the Sabres Mark 1 through 4. They got leading edge slat. Now, later F models and Canadair Mark 5s and the Australian Avon Sabre had the hard 6.3 leading edge fence. Okay, it didn't have any slats. Now the Canadair Sabre Mark 6 had its own slat versions. Now the F8640H and 86L had the extended 12-inch wingtip, which our Sabres didn't have. They didn't have it. Now there's one other important one we have to mention is the air scoop. Now this is typical of the Canadair Sabres. they were, because the Orenda engines needed more air, they developed an air scoop here to get more in and through the engine compartment. Now you can make your own sugar scoops. I did it myself just by going by that picture. But you can get it in a resin part. Now whether that's still available or not, I don't know. But if you're going to do a Canadair Sabre in any scale, you got to have these things. Now, as I said before, I was going to put up pictures of I've put up pictures of my own model that I did. I used an old monogram kit. So I'll let you, I'll let you peruse over those. Now we go on to available models. Hi. So for CL-13 Sabres 1/72nd scale, we have the Heller kit, which is not a bad kit, but at the time period, the best one that was going was the Fujimi kit. I've built the Fujimi kit. It's a nice kit. A little sparse in the cockpit, but time period. Then we had Hobbycraft come along with their version of the Sabre in 1/72nd, and I got to tell you, it is a good kit. In fact, it's still being produced by Academies, who's got the molds for some reason. I never could figure that one out. I have to really dig into and find out what's going on there. But the it comes with the slatted wings, which is the first anybody ever done. So then along came the Taglieri kit, which is a good kit in its own right, and I think it is the Fujimi kit that comes in the box, because usually Fujimi testers and Taglieri usually go hand in hand. Now in 1/48 scale, of course, we got the monogram kit. I built that kit in the markings, and I made the sugar scoops for it. I'm putting the pictures up of it now for you to see. And the only thing, I built it straight out of the box. I didn't rescribe it or anything. The only thing I did change was I didn't like the injection seat, so I bought a resin injection seat and stuffed it in there to make it look better. But I used Flightline, I think it was Flightline Decals, but I did it in the Blue Nose Squadron, which I always liked. So then we got the Revell Hasegawa kit. Now, depending on what year of Revell kit you buy, it's either the monogram kit, which Revell bought monogram in the Revell box, or it's the Hasegawa kit that's been put in a Revell box. And I believe it's the latter of the recent Revell releases. And the best one of them all right now is the Airfix kit. Airfix has done an excellent job in their 1/48 scale kit, and it is a Canadair version, because the British used the Canadair version, not the North American version. In 1/32nd scale, there is the Kinetics kit, which also comes in the Taglieri box. Now, it's a good kit, but the one that held the standard for the longest time is the Hasegawa kit. Now, it builds into a nice kit, and maybe one of these days I'll actually build it. But I think that's about it. Now, I just realized I forgot to do the decals. Aerographics did decals back in the day in both 172nd and 148th. I'm not too sure if they ever did 132nd. I'll have to check that. But for decals, there's a lot of 148 scale decals. There is leading edge decals, which I used. I'm putting that one up on my monogram kit. I just remembered what one it was. And there's Model Alliance that does Canadair Sabres too. So yeah, that's about it this time. Sorry about that.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that video, and please remember to subscribe to my channel and punch that like button. You also can donate to my channel through my PayPal, which is on the main page of my channel, and you also can donate through Patreon. So, as always, every build is an adventure, so go make it awesome, and we'll see you again later, and you have a good day. Goodbye.